But before, oh, thank you. Should we start over?
I think it's
So as I was saying, I just got involved in starting a new Japan American Society in Miami, South Florida. But before I moved to Florida, I also was working like full-time as a program manager at JAS DFW, and also was on the board and heavily involved in running for Japanese Society, and was involved with Japan American Society in Indiana when I was in college. So we're going to talk about here today to talk about how your JETAA chapters can get more engagement with your Japan American societies and how you can work together for your mutual benefit. So we've introduced ourselves. So now we want to know a little bit about you. We know that a lot of people are already in contact with your JASs. So please just by show of hands, who is a member of their local JAS?
Yay.
Okay, 1%. 1% for those online. All right, and then how many of you know or are able to contact your Japan America Society, your local Japan America Society executive director or leadership? Okay, okay, 5 more people. And then have you ever partnered with your JS in your, okay, raise your hands.
Like chapter partners?
Yeah, chapter partners on any events or other things. Looks like about half maybe. That's pretty good. And then has anyone ever volunteered with their Japan American Society personally? Okay, again, half
That counts.
and finally, do you feel like, who feels like they have a good relationship? Their chapter has a good relationship. Ooh, okay. I'm reading maybe some drama in the room. So-sos. Okay.
Want that tea later.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll have to talk about that tonight, I guess. Okay, so that gives us a little bit of a starting place in terms of, what information we can provide. And I think we all agree that if you have questions along the way as we're presenting information, please just raise your hand. This is supposed to be a back and forth. Okay.
This question feels really formal, but it's just us.
And then, yeah, just let us know if there's anybody asking questions online. Okay, so we just wanted to start with talking about what is Japan American Society and what is NAJAS, the National Association of Japan American Societies. So a lot of you probably know this, but basically the National Association of Japan American Societies, it's a DC-based nonprofit. It is basically exists to serve its member societies. So it does work at the national level that benefits these locally based independent nonprofits that all have the same mission. So Japan American Societies go by a few different names. In Japanese, it's a little easier to understand the difference between Japan American Societies and similar organizations, Nichibei Kyokai. So there's an emphasis on the US-Japan. So they may be called Japan Society, Japanese America, Japanese Society. But if they use this kanji, that's a good sign that the emphasis is really US-Japan relationships. And that comes out in their programming initiatives and things like that. Very similar organizations that would still be potentially good partners, but are not necessarily going to be affiliated with NAJAS at all, are Nihon Jinkais, which are usually by and for Japanese expats or Nikkei. So Japan American Societies or Nichibei Kyokai basically are all independent nonprofits. They may or may not be a part of NAJAS, the national network, but they serve their local area, whether that's a state, a city, or they may or may not be members of NAJAS. It's totally optional. And actually there's a fee to join. So many of them are not.
Yeah, it's similar to like USJETAA or JETAA USA, where it's like an umbrella organization that serves the chapters and helps provide resources support. But the difference is they have to pay to be a member of NAJAS, but you don't have to pay to be a member of JETAA.
Yeah, they're not really chapters.
But yeah, their societies here.
Yeah, and that's supposed to say Nichibei Kyokai.
Oh yeah. No,
Yeah.
that was it. Sorry about that. That was totally a late night.
But if you look over here, you can see it because it's in the.
Yeah, right. I'm sorry.
There's a laser pointer.
No, hold on. How do I do this? This is good. Is it this? There.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the
Yeah.
Nichibei Kyokai.
Yeah.
Sorry, that copy and paste didn't work very well. For some reason, Canva did not like my Japanese font, and I had to work very hard on it. Okay, so that's just a little overview to give you an idea of what we're talking about, and we're going to continue covering a little bit more. So we've got outlined here on this map all of the JETAA regions, and so every little star is a JAS that is a member of the NAJAS networks. There's about 38, and I've also included NAJAS itself is also in DC. So you may want to, you're welcome to take photos of anything, anytime. Unfortunately, Alaska, I'm sorry to report, there are no JASs that are at least part of the NAJAS network at this time. But I also want to note if you, the regions of JETAA are very big. Your closest JAS may actually be in the state next to you. So do look, this is in St. Louis, but if you were in Southern Illinois, that might actually be your closest JAS that would be willing to support, because their area, they're focused on this metro area. They're going to actually go into Illinois a little bit. So don't just look at, where your JAS is physically located. Their service area may be a little bit larger.
I think what's important about this as well too is that as a JETAA chapter, most of you have several opportunities, several different JASs that you could engage with. And I think that's really great to see.
And how many of you were familiar with all of the JASs in your area? Okay, good. So
I will say there's one in Wyoming that's starting back.
it's starting back up. Is it a member of NAJAS?
He's in JETAA.
And it's run by JET Alumni.
I see.
Wow.
But, reminds me of like sister cities, whether you're a member of SDI. Or, right.
And that's another point. A lot of JASs often, if they don't have a Sister Cities International membership, they often manage the sister city relationship.
Yeah.
So that's a sidebar note, but that may be another way to get involved in sister city. Okay. All right, but so even though every, like they're all over the country and everything, the JAS missions are pretty much the same. So we put our various missions here, kind of bolded the key points. I don't know if you guys want to talk a little bit about them now, or
Our missions are the same, but perhaps how we go about it may be different. Like in Kentucky, we do a lot of corporate networking because there's over 200 Japanese companies in Kentucky, so we're heavily corporate based. And we do lots of programming with schools, libraries, and yeah, we're trying to expand and try to reach everybody in Kentucky. I don't know. Oh, and we have our annual events like a gala, Shinenkai, Bonenkai, and our annual golf classic. And that's kind of what we do to work towards our mission. But I don't know what events or programming.
well, and I think there's another slide. We can go
Yeah.
into it, but yeah, the key here is it's very grassroots. It's very person to person. So, there's emphasis on connecting, meaningful exchanges, all of these different programming areas and spheres. So that can include career development, Meiji exchanges, all kinds of opportunities for your members. But their missions are very broad, which is sometimes confusing about JSs because people want to know what they do. And it's sort of like they can do almost anything as long as it's promoting Japan or Japanese culture in their area.
I think if you look at all of these, that they're gonna, like, the missions have similar words in them, right? The JAS Colorado is connecting via business, education, and culture. And then you go over to Miami South Florida, it has the education, culture, business. And then you go to Kentucky and it's got business, community relationship, right? And mutual understanding, which is a little bit of a different take, but it's basically the same thing.
So JAS missions are the same, but every JAS is different. And we're calling this EJID. So here are a little bit of a summary of our different organizations that we represent. You want to start talking about?
Yeah. So just like every chapter is different, every Japan America Society is different, their capacity is different, their staff is different, what they're going to focus on is different depending on their region. So for the JAS that I was still engaged with, it started in 1989. So I think the oldest one is actually Boston. Super old, I can't remember what.
Yeah, it's over, because New York's over 100 years old.
Yeah,
so
Boston was the first
right.
one.
So it's over
50 or something. But so ours is relatively new. We're 1989. We have 1 full-time staff, 2 part-time staff, and 2 contract staff. So that's actually pretty good for a Japan America Society. And this is where it starts to really get different too, is we have 46 corporate members. So companies that are paying to be a member of the Japan America Society. And then we have 376 individual members. And by that, I mean people just like you and me or families. And there's different membership levels in there, but not corporations or companies. Of those 14 are JET alumni. So my Japan America Society gives a special discount for JET alumni. So that's just to give you, that's the makeup of ours. You wanna-
Sure. So comparing that to Japan American Society Miami South Florida, which is brand new. We started in March, so we are all volunteer right now. We have not gotten to a point where we've been able, we're still getting our 501c3 membership process, so we're to the point where we can't quite ask for grants yet. But we are starting to get headway in getting corporate memberships and individuals. And so, we are involved in a lot of different kinds of programming. We've done some business focused events, some, festivals and cultural events. We've got some baseball players coming in the fall that we're going to try to do events with. So we're doing a lot of things, but it's very much, managing by the seat of our pants and people paying their own way and things like that. And everybody doing things in their spare time. So the resources that we have to offer another organization looking to partner with us is really expertise, connection to the community, and community partners, and or any audience that we could draw. But we're not going to be able to provide a lot of labor and things like that.
And I already mentioned in the earlier slide, we have over 200 Japanese companies in Kentucky, but only right now 140 of them are our members. So our goal is to eventually have every Japanese company in Kentucky be a member of JASC. We have 2 full-time staff, me and my boss, and 1 contract staff from Japan. Other programs or things that we're involved in right now, we're building a Japanese botanical garden in Louisville. That's a huge project, the designers from Kyoto. And we've been working with the gardens a lot to try and expand our footprint in Kentucky. And as you see, we don't have a lot of individual members. That is something we would like to build, and that's one of my goals as project manager, to help grow our individual membership. And I'm hoping through our working with JETAA, we'll be able to do that, but that's still something I'm working. So, yeah.
So you can see Japan American societies can be very different. Some of them are all volunteer and have been for decades, not just the brand new ones. And so they are in a very different situation in terms of the number of events, the types of events, the types of things they can offer their partners versus you have some very robust ones, especially in the bigger cities like New York, Boston, Northern California, Southern California, also very robust. So, be aware when we're talking about how to engage your Japan American societies, it's helpful to come with an idea of what situation and to understand what situation your JAS may be in before you start asking for things or offering things. I see there's some chat notes. Are there any questions online? Okay. All right. So, and then now we kind of just wanted to differentiate between JETAA and Japan American Society. And I don't know if you wanted to go over those a little bit.
Yeah, so I sometimes feel like there's a feeling of competition with Japan American societies and JETAA chapters, and I felt it from both sides. I don't know if anybody else felt this too in there. Okay, yeah. So I feel like nobody wants to talk about it, but everyone can kind of feel it sometimes. Where like the Japan American societies, they want JETAA members to join the Japan American societies. The Jets are like, yeah, we got our own thing going on, or it can be really different. So I think that probably in the larger scope of, in the big landscape of different US-Japan organizations that are out there, I would say most Jets, besides their JETAA chapter, will feel most comfortable in a Japan American Society space. I think that's for most places, that's the most relatable. Those are like the closest to being in our tribe, right? They have experientially, it's very similar, but it's not actually it's not a replacement for your JETAA chapter. Your JETAA chapter still it's still all Jets, right? Like I can go to my Japan American Society events and have a lot of fun there, but nobody really knows what the bell sounds like in the school. That's only my JETAA people, right? Like you all know what that bell sounds like. You know what time of day it rings at, So there's these commonalities that exist with your JETAA chapter that aren't going to be in the Japan American Society. You're also not necessarily going to continue working with diplomatic ties to your Japan American Society. It just doesn't exist all the time, or it's not accessible to you as a regular member. Where when you're part of your JETAA chapter, that's a lot of what you're doing with your time. let's see. I would also say JETAA can provide customized career support and professional development. So a lot of what we're doing, a lot of what many chapters are moving towards doing is really helping support their members to further develop their careers, to stay in the US-Japan space, to support that. Your Japan America Society can help give you connections to your local community in a way that you might not be able to get through your chapter. So I guess there's a little bit of, what am I saying, overlap in the Venn diagram in that space. This last one, social community across the nation. Oh yeah, okay. So the other thing is like when you're part of one JETAA chapter, like this is great. This is what I love about these NatCons too. I'm like, oh, I have a professional network that spans the entire United States, you know? And that's because of JETAA. Like we know everybody across the nation. Like I know Arisa in San Francisco. I know Vivian in Washington, D.C., you know, so your network ends up being really huge, and you're not necessarily going to Japan. But your JAS can help plug you in to your local community in a very different way. Oftentimes, because of their corporate sponsorships, they're going to have relationships with businesses and corporations at that sort of different level. So I think that can be really valuable. And more education, individual community, corporate focus. Oh yeah, okay. So they're going to be able to provide resources as well that your JETAA chapter might not be able to. So those are just some things to think about and be aware of.
And I would just add, you know, coming from a perspective of getting connected, you know, the JETAA perspective of trying to get connected to other people in your community. A lot of Japanese businesses, like we were talking about this morning, know they want to hire JET alums, but they also know when they go into a community, they want to join the local Japan America Society. So in terms of if you're trying to connect with Japanese companies or you know, in your community, the Japan America Society is often, or the Nihon Jinkai is often the first place that they're going to reach out to when they move to a community. So there's sort of just a disconnect there where they know they're going to donate, they know they're going to spend time, they know they're going to network that way with that organization, whereas they might know they want to hire from the JET alumni chapter, but they don't necessarily engage them. So that's sort of a distinction. And you know, sometimes even Japan American societies that are in very similar communities feel like they're competing for the same dollars, which is why you can have some tension in these very similar types of organizations. They feel like we're going to have similar events, we're going to be requesting money from the same donors, but the types of money that you're requesting to like Toyota are just like not, they will give both of you the money, they will gladly, you know, go to both events. So there's really, you know, even though there can be competition, there's really ways to balance things and not feel so competitive, but just knowing that, you know, what size is your Japan America Society, when you go to approach them, is going to make it, and, you know, you might know that you need to be a little bit more careful if they're sort of feeling scared that they're going to lose their 5 big corporate sponsors that provide all of their revenue to the JETAA chapter. And you can relieve that, you know, worry if you kind of know going in.
Can I just ask, who here would like to work with their Japan America Societies, their local ones? Like who here sees the benefit to their chapter?
A few hands, maybe,
Sure.
not sure.
Who's like not really sure, they're not totally convinced also.
Well,
Yeah.
For Portland, JASO,
Yeah,
Oregon, they're been there for so long,
yeah.
and I'm assuming there's been some tension in the past, so I have to work through what all that tension
There's some
was
history and you
and try
gotta
to start it over, so.
And that's
Starting that block.
That's really common. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no.
That's really common in the nonprofit space in general. I found that you get, you know, people join nonprofits, whether they're being paid or not, because they want to be passionate about something. So it's deeply personal to people. And so you can sometimes get people kind of jealously guarding their vision for their nonprofit because maybe they've had people abandon them or let them down and it's been bad for the nonprofit. And so that's nobody's fault that, you know, we all inherit these problems sometimes, but I would just say don't get discouraged.
Don't take it personally.
And don't
It's
take
on
it-
you.
I know.
Discouraged, you know, you can work through those. I have worked through those, you know, breaks, and I'm actually having to work through one now because there was a Japan American Society in South Florida 20 years ago, and it left a very bitter taste. And the way it ended, it did not end for good reasons. There was wrongdoing, and so people were very, very skeptical when we wanted to start a new one. But now we've already in a few months changed minds. So it just is about rebuilding through your own passion and, conviction that you're trustworthy, that trust. Because trust is the biggest thing you have in as a nonprofit.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
That's for since you asked, and I'm just wondering, Jessica, you mentioned like or someone mentioned it, like understanding like what your Japan American Society situation is before you say, hey, how can I help you? Or like, how can y'all help me? How would I go about even having that conversation of understanding their situation? Like, what are the right things to ask to figure that out? Does that make
It
sense?
does make sense.
Okay.
So I can tell you what I would do
Yeah.
is if you want to work with your Japan American Society and you have a line in to the executive director, I would just have a meeting with them.
I used to intern for them, so like.
Oh, so
for
you know.
You wrote my recommendation letter for Japan,
Yeah.
like to get to JET.
Uh-huh.
I think we're pretty full.
So I would do that. I'd say, hey, we're interested in working with you, or we want to build a relationship. Can you just have coffee with?
That easy? That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking, but I was just okay. Cool.
That's like your first, and then from there it can blossom. But yeah, just saying it's totally appropriate. Yep.
And we're
Thank you.
going to talk a little bit more about this, but yeah, what I think we were saying is before you launch into I have an idea, here's what I have, I've thought it all through, start with, hey, what's going on? What do you want to do? Like those fact-finding questions, if you don't already know them.
Yeah.
And build that and say, oh, here's what we're trying to do. And then that kind of creates a little bit more, you'll be able to tailor a program idea
Yeah.
to their needs that they're going to find appealing. So maybe you have more than one meeting to get to that point where you're pitching a program.
Yeah. Thank you.
Of course. So now we wanted just to talk about what is the value add that each organization can provide the other. Anyone else want to? I can walk you through.
I also feel, I don't know. I feel
Yeah, look at our own notes here. So, I'll start with the JS this time. So they, like we said, they have a lot of those companies that are interesting to JET alumni for career development, networking opportunities. And because their business focused programming is about networking, that's why a lot of companies join, specifically to go to those like sake networking events or policy events to meet big people that they wouldn't normally be able to get access to. That's also good access for your constituents. And so I guess, we would do this way. So for the JETAA, they have a vast network of individuals who have that personal connection to Japan. So if you are going to this event because you're looking for a job or you're looking to, for a client, the JS may have an event there that could be a really good, exchange. You have a lot of people in JETAA who know about Japan and a lot of companies or who may be looking to do business with Japan or who themselves are Japanese companies. In JAS, you have volunteer opportunities and that are available to members of the community that can lead to a deeper understanding of grassroots ties and how that functions in your areas. And in JETAA, that's the actual next generation of leadership. So the JS mission is to bring their community closer to Japan, to create mutual understanding, to create friendship and peace. And they need leaders to continue them forward. They need people that are going to sustain that organization beyond one generation. And so you need a pipeline. And the JETAA are perfect, people to enter that role and to start bringing into their board leadership, development, their staff, all of those things.
I think Amy and I were talking about this, but I don't know, almost every Japan American Society that I have interacted with, they're like, where are the young people? We need the young people. And, we're like, oh, we have people. Yeah. So it's something that I think a lot of US Japan related organizations are grappling with. And so that's a huge value that the JETAA community brings. And, we have a large swath of demographics now in the 36th year of the JET program, but we also have a lot of young people.
And I think that's another point is a lot of the JSs are older. And so the leadership tends to skew older, especially the board, and their ideas about fundraising, they have galas and all that. And that's all very well and good and necessary. But in terms of what the next generation is going to want to do when they're donating, all those ideas that, how things are changing, they're not necessarily in tune to that. So they may not be getting young people in because they're doing what, their generation did to get involved. So that can be a really good partnership because you can bring that knowledge of this is what we're doing now. Go ahead.
To add on to that, one of the challenges that JASC is facing is that because we're heavily corporate based, we don't have a lot of programming to bring in young people. So we're trying to figure out how we can collaborate with our local JETAA chapter to do that. Which is why I joined JETAA, to see what we can do to collaborate and create programming at JASC and collaborate together. So I don't know. I'm here to get ideas from you guys. Yeah.
So the next bullet on the JETAA side, we all have deep firsthand knowledge of that Japanese culture and all those things we talked about this morning, that the soft skills, but we don't necessarily know where they're needed. And your JAS and their membership may be able to point you in the direction, whether it's in their staff, in volunteering, or in, their member organizations, or in, organizations who come to them saying, hey, we want to do business with some of your, Japanese-based organizations. But we don't know how to connect to them. We've had trouble connecting to them. And finally, JETAA can promote, or this is both really, yeah. So just by having, another promotional partner, you can both promote your events and promote membership. So a lot of times people don't always join JETAA right when they come back, but they will join. You'll stumble into the JAS somehow because they go to a festival. JAS do a lot of events.
Or they take Japan into Google. The first thing that
Yeah.
pops up is Japan American Society of where, blank, fill in the blank,
And so it's just easier to find sometimes. And, especially if you're covering a large area, as we saw, they may join their JS that's not where the consulate is, or go to an event that's not where the consulate is. And that then, if your JS had a question that said, are you a JET alumni? Please let us know. Then they could relay that information to you and you could reach out to them. And vice versa, you can promote their events for them, and so that becomes a mutual, really beneficial relationship. And then, finally the JS, because they have a lot of them are 501c3s, which is a tax advantage status. So they have a lot more funding available to them. And they also just, as I said, are kind of, a lot of Japanese corporations know they're going to donate to the JS responsive. So they just have a lot more dollars available for programming, which you could share or partner on an event.
Have any of you guys ever used JAS to do any of these things? Like, have you ever partnered with them for networking or cross-promoted events or anything like that?
Try.
Okay.
They just seem to be more established, and they, like, for Oregon's perspective, they have all these programs to get all the young people.
Yeah.
They've cut us off. This is what I'm fighting. They like, well, we've done it all. We know what to do. We don't need your help.
I see.
So that's what I'm fighting.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's a hard place to be in.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit more about that. I think we could do, I think we could definitely, for brainstorming here and then.
But promoting events is one of the easiest things that you can do. Like RJ, and of course, we've had this advantage, right? Because I've worked for the JAS and probably anyway, so you kind of create that pathway that's all of a sudden going back and forth, right? Between the two. But once it's established, it's really easy to maintain. But we have promoted each other's events consistently. We have been able to find one or two sort of annual programs that we partner on. And so if you can sort of establish those little things, then all of a sudden it really starts to take shape. It can go from there. And you don't have to start huge. Like sometimes your Japan American study can feel really intimidating because they can do these big things that like you can't do, right? They have paid staff, they have access to grants. And you're like, oh, we're here with our 3 volunteers that made it to the meeting, But so you don't have to start big, you can start small. And I feel like, to Sahai's question, like if you just sit down with the executive director, except for maybe but if you can sit down with them and like explain sort of where you're at and what you're trying to do, I do feel like in general, the US-Japan space is very supportive of each other. Like we're all moving towards the same mission. We just have different ways of getting there, or we've got different angles or different demographics that we're working with. We're all working towards the same goal. And I think people genuinely understand that. So we can lift each other up, right? And we all win. Yeah. So it's kind of setting the scene for that.
Yeah, I was going to mention, so I'm from JETAA. So I think we have a decent relationship with our American Society because we do a lot of like cross promotion where like if you share an event, we put it in our newsletter and vice versa. They've also been kind enough to donate sake to some of our events. Yeah, they're not gonna use it, so might as well give it to somebody who will. But I think like Jessica's idea, like actually having to sit down with the director to talk about how we could further collaborate, not beyond the passive stuff we've been doing. I think would be really good to, approach.
And another idea, there's multiple leadership people in an organization that is a nonprofit. You've got a board, and I'm not saying like go over the head of the executive director because that's the person you're going to end up with. But if you really feel like you're butting heads with that person for some reason, it might be there might be a route if you talk to someone on the board, because then they can persuade that person. But you have to be careful of doing things like that. You don't want to burn bridges or anything.
That's a good thing to do at like an in-person event. If you can
Yeah.
identify one of the board members, then you can just have a casual conversation with them instead of an email where you're like, hey, I got this problem.
Yeah. Never say you have a problem with the executive director. Don't do it. And don't do it in writing.
Something our board did during the pandemic was we created a board spot position for JET alum. And so we just call them the JET representative. So if your board or at the Japan America Society doesn't have a JET representative, you could also like maybe like pitch that idea
Yeah.
and say, hey, I would love to represent JET alum. And then once that's established, then your JETAA chapter will have an easier like communication with your local JAS.
Someone with hopefully authority and trust of that.
Yes.
So that it helps. So we've talked about some of these partnership benefits between the organizations, but yeah, a lot of JETAA chapters are not 501c3s, some are. And actually many JSs are. And so if it's possible with grant funding that they can administer grants as a 501c3 and partner with you, as long as it's consistent with their mission. They're always going to be driven by their mission and limited by that. But I remember at JSDFW, we did actually help smaller nonprofits. We managed the money for them so that, because they needed sort of that, I don't want to say shell because that has a negative connotation, but they needed, nicety, legal nicety.
USJETAA for you as well. Just throw that out there also.
And resource for exchange. So essentially for the JAS partnership benefit, what JETAA can offer is you have, they manage a lot of the sister city relationships, they manage diplomatic exchanges, or they support them. They're asked by their local municipality, hey, we've got a business mission coming in. How can we get translators? Can we get homestays? Can we get hospitality support? And JET alumni often speak the language, are culturally adept, and can kind of help manage those things. We have 10 minutes left. You want to just skip? Are there people who want to ask questions? You want to skip to Q&A?
I think there's only one more slide left. Yeah,
Okay.
that's the last slide.
Why don't we, I think we've covered most of these, yeah. Yeah, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so you started touching on this. Jessica, did you want to cover this?
Sure. So this is what you were asking tonight, right? Like, what are the steps? How do you make this happen? So, the first thing is obviously to find and connect with your JAS leadership. So it might be, and you don't always have to go to the executive director, right? If you know that there's a JET alum working at your JAS that's like lower down on the hierarchical ladder there, like that's fine. That's an in too, So take the path of least resistance and the one that you think is going to be most beneficial and amenable to working with you. And then, so this sort of goes back to our career talk as well, but I feel like as JETs, we have all spent time in Japan, and we've spent a lot of time observing people around us and observing our communities. We've become very good observers because that's how we try to make the least amount of embarrassing mistakes as possible. But this is also something you can do in your US-Japan community. So take a look and see what's out there. Figure out what the gaps are. Figure out what your community needs. And then think about an idea or a program that fulfills your JETAA mission and also fills that gap. And then you can propose that idea to your Japan America Society if it's something you want to partner with them on. So it's got to add value and it has to attract members from both organizations, right? So it's got to be a win-win on both sides. But this is where like you initially have that just random coffee meeting where you get to know each other and get to know each other's organizational needs a little bit more. And then mull it over for a while. Think about something that you might want to do that's meaningful to your membership as well, and then come back and propose it. By then, you'll have a better idea as to what the capacity is of your Japan American Society, what your capacity is within that. And that's sort of your, your first step into making some sort of an event happen. And then you want to work with your Japan American Society every step of the way. There's certain ways that you partner with somebody to make an event happen. And if you don't kind of follow that protocol, it can leave a bad taste in their mouth. So like, here's an example from my chapter. My chapter wanted to partner with our local JAS. This was when I first started at Japan American Society. My chapter wanted to partner with them on something. And they said, yes, go ahead. And then my chapter made a flyer, a promotional flyer, put the JAS logo on there and sent it out far and wide on social media without checking with the executive director. They didn't do it to be mean. They didn't do it to be inappropriate. They didn't have the professional experience to know that they had to do that first. They just didn't know. So then my boss was like, oh, this is terrible. We're never working with them again. I can't believe they did this. And I had to like pull her back. I'm like, no, they're not terrible people. They just didn't know. They've never had this experience before. So if you make sure that you work with them every step of the way, you've got someone to sort of hold your hand through it. So it's professional development for you and your organization as well. Now you know how to partner with someone. Now you know what the appropriate steps are. Now you know who it has to get. How many people have to honk that flyer before it goes on social media. So just make sure that until you have run 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 programs with your JAS, that you have that really close net relationship with them as you go through the process. Because it is really hard to repair. It's much easier to keep a good relationship going than it is to repair a relationship that's been damaged somehow.
And this kind of goes to what I was saying before about, sometimes there are egos in nonprofits and also that the reputation of a nonprofit is its main, selling point. It has to maintain that. And so whether both in terms of like producing the quality of events and the quality of, materials that look professional and that are meeting the standards that their membership expects, but also in terms of getting credit so that when they, at the end of the year, when that's branding, just like Toyota puts their brand on an event they sponsor, Japan American Society wants to put their brand on an event they sponsor so the community knows they're doing things. So that when they go to a new member, that member might say, oh yeah, I saw that event, I saw you were running it. So, just always being aware that brand recognition is very important to Japan American societies and to all nonprofits that are in the space. I think will kind of help guide you safely, but always keeping them in the loop every single step of the way is the best thing. Okay, we have a little bit of time for questions. Were there any online questions? Okay, and then so we can talk about Oregon. Was there anyone else that wanted to have a specific problem? Okay, so do you want to tell us some of that? I know it's like being a broadcast, but hey, don't mention it.
So they just seem to be really established for eons. I know the board is all getting older. And so I don't know what happened in the past, but it just seems that they don't recognize the Alumni Association. Even though I know there's a lot of alumni in there, in the group, it's just they just do not want to recognize the association.
They don't want to recognize you as in they don't want to work with you or they don't want to have anything to do with you.
To me, what it seems is they recognize that JETAA exists, but we're under the consulate. So they'll just promote the consulate, but they won't.
They don't see you as your own standalone
Yeah.
organization. They see you as an offshoot of the consulate.
So it's like,
Do you feel comfortable making that distinction? And like, is the consulate comfortable with that distinction or?
yeah, I know the consulate wants to, but I don't know if they're just again in that dynamic, like, no, this is JETAA, this is JETAA, you guys need to work out your problem.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So
And maybe there may actually just be confusion that, that's the Japanese government.
I know who the director is. I've talked to the guy many times at events.
Yeah.
The only thing is there's no discount for a JETAA member. for a lot.
It's not all JESs that do that, just some of them.
Yeah, some.
Yeah.
But, I mean, look at the website together. I mean, it is pretty pricey.
Yeah.
Someone who just came back from Japan, I don't think they can afford it.
That's the other thing that people run into where sometimes, okay, so there's like so many things going on here. So I think there, a lot of times, JAS events can be overpriced for what JETs are able to or used to pay for, right? And they can feel super business oriented. Like, I'm sorry, how many of us, when we just get back from JET and have, you know, whatever job we can scrape together while we're living in our parents' basement every night, like, how many of us
Very specific.
can scrape? So how many of us can scrape together, you know, $50 for a business luncheon and go in the middle of the day when maybe you have a retail job, because that's what you could find when you first came back, you know? So these types of things, it feels like a wall. And so it can be super intimidating. So part of it is actually educating the JAS. Like I think sometimes they don't even realize this is just the way they've done business for so long. And this is their membership group that they have catered to for so long. So, and if they're complaining about not having young people be part of it, it's because they are also not young and they might not remember what it's like to be young, right? So part of it is an education thing on your part. The other part that nobody ever wants to talk about is that JASs see themselves as being very professional, and JETAA chapters, we don't have the capacity to operate at that professional level. We don't have paid staff. We can't put on a gala for 200 people that costs, you know, whatever, $20,000 to front. That's not the way we operate, you know? So I think being really upfront with what your capabilities and your capacity is, and then being able to deliver that. So that's how you build the relationship, right? You say like, okay, we can operate here and we can do an activity at this level or an event or a program at this level.
Yeah, my thought is maybe just ask them, hey, can we just have an information table at your next event? Just,
Yeah, I think that's.
that's what I'm thinking. It's like, I'll just start small again.
Yes.
Somebody burned a bridge somewhere, but I gotta read it.
Say, you know, like, hey, I've had a really hard time connecting with you. I don't know if there's, you know, something that happened historically, but I'd like to restart the relationship. That's super frank and, you know, upfront and professional, you know? So just, it's okay to say, hey, this is what I've experienced, but I'd like to move over here, you know?
And I think it's important to know that even the JSs that have full-time staff, having worked at one of those, I did the job of probably 3 full-time people. And I was able to do it because I got really efficient at it. But anytime anybody came with a great program idea, my first reaction honestly was like, oh my gosh, I can't do anything more. And so if they were like, this is going to be all on you, it wasn't that we wouldn't do it, just maybe we're going to have to shuffle, you know, we had a pipeline of partner events and all kinds of things that we'd already committed to or that we felt obligated to do. So never, that may be something at play that, you know, the staff are already kind of really working, doing more than they can already. And so they're just functioning. They're just struggling to operate, doing something new, starting something new is kind of overwhelming sometimes. Jazz is really big, but even, you know, those organizations can get stuck. So
I will say, like, one way that our chapter has been really successful in engaging with our Japan American Society is not to ask them to do more. So we'll have an event that we want to run, but we don't have the space to do it, and we don't want to have to pay the rental fee for the space. They're really good. They have so many corporate members with a lot of, you know, with a lot of space. So that's the way that we work with our JAS really effectively. Saying, we want to do this event. We think your members would really like it too. Do you think you could help us with space? Done. Partnership. Both logos go on the flyer that they have checked before we send it out, you know, and there you go. So you're still doing the work of putting it together, but they're providing the space. So there's your mutually beneficial.
and then once the event goes well and everybody said that was super great, we love the Jets, then it's easier to start the rhythm of these types of partnerships.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you don't know about, like, law firms all have venue space
Yeah.
for like these client development events. A lot of these client facing companies, accounting firms, law firms, they have in-house event space for like up to 100 people. So that can be a really.
Yeah, we've done all kinds of stuff. We did a Fudoshiki event at a law firm. We do a Nengajo making party every year and space in the JETAA building. So that's that space is worth a lot of money.
And just to clarify, what I meant by that is a lot of law firms and service oriented businesses join JSs to get to
Yeah.
the Toyotas and the NECs and the, you know, I must have seen Dallas-based companies, that's where I, but
Any other questions or challenges or can we do that?
one more. Okay, were there any online? Last check? No. Okay, well, these are our contact information. We, you know, we got a few hats that Amy and I are wearing, so we had Linktree, or I guess I did a Google. But yeah, then the Jessica's contact information. So feel free to contact us anytime. We need more relationships. I think Jessica's actually doing a panel at the NAJAS annual meeting in 2 weeks that we're all gonna be at, talking to the JSs about how they can partner with the JETAA.
Thanks, I will send you the- But no, I want to know like success stories, you know, ways that you have worked with your JAS that you've been really happy with. And I also am curious to know, like, what are the challenges that you all feel like that you're facing because of something? You know, in the end, like, we should be working together. There's overlap in the Venn diagram. There's space for both of us there.
I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I just feel like we've had events together before.
Yeah.
In our JAS, but it was years before. And I don't know if we kind of like, you know, I keep inviting you to my party and nobody's coming kind of thing. And so it just kind of faded away, I guess, because I do remember volunteering at a JAS event. And then it's like, well, you know, I've got other conflicts, I'm not gonna be going to that. And then it's like, oh, is anybody from, you know, any JET going to a JAS event? And at the same time, are they inviting us? For example, I mentioned Sorrel because, you know, we all saw her today. She presented as a JET alumni at a JAS event. And it was a Hokkaido camp.
Oh.
And so they had different things, and then Sorrel talked about Hokkaido Matsuris. And so as a JET, you know, you go to all the Matsuri, dive into all of those things. And so, yeah, this panel was talking about different aspects, sponsored by Sapporo. And, yeah, so that way we used to get invited to stuff too. And so I feel like, I don't know if it's the change in leadership or everything kind of fell apart during the pandemic and we're still trying to navigate how to re-engage, but yeah, it kind of faded off. So,
I mean, there's space in there. You just kind of have to find it, right? And then build on it. Like USJETAA, we're doing a panel with the Japan American Society of Boston in mid-October. They wanted to do a career panel for young people to, you know, expose how to, you know, work, live, study, volunteer in Japan. And so we were obvious to reach out to, right? So we're bringing teachers to the panel, you know, so it's like, there is space there. You just have to find it. And you don't want to make more work for you.
yeah.
And you don't want to make more work for them. So it's thinking about where is that overlap? Where are we going to be serving both of our members so that it's added value on both sides and then flip it in there, you know?
Another example is one of the feedback we got from young professionals was that our event fees were too expensive for young professionals to afford. So last year's Bonnenkai, we made it $25 instead of usually it's like $100. And that allowed for a lot of young professionals to join and they could network with our members. So that's just one of the
thing that
things.
happened, I just thought about this. So when your JAS has these big like galas or fundraisers or whatever, so there'll be corporate members that will sponsor a whole table, right? Like they'll buy seats at a whole table. Maybe they only send 2 people. The worst thing for the JAS is to have a table with only 2 people sitting at it. So our JAS then will reach out to JET alums, say, we've got 8 seats left and I'll sell them to you for $20 a piece or whatever, you know, now you have the opportunity to come and network at this really amazing event that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. And that's also bringing up the next generation.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, it's a really good idea.
All right, well, I know we're
Yeah.
over time, so everyone needs time to change. So, but anyway, thank you for all of your questions and everything. Please feel free to reach out if you have more specific advice that you would like.